Hello everyone, my name is Rob and I'm a postdoctoral scientist based in Vienna, Austria. In this video, I do a scientific test of the sleep tracking of the Huawei Watch Fit by comparing it against a scientific EEG monitor. Last week, I tested the more expensive Huawei GT2 Pro, which also uses the True Sleep 2.0 algorithm. It will be interesting to see if the performance of the Watch Fit is comparable to that of the GT2 Pro. I previously tested the heart rate accuracy of the Watch Fit, which I was quite positive about. If you're interested in that video, I'll link it below. As always, I do not want to waste your time, so timestamps are in the description below and also on the timeline. Before getting to the test, I would like to provide the most important background information on the Huawei Watch Fit. The Watch Fit is not too expensive, currently costing about $100 to $110 on Amazon, but often you can buy it for even less. It is advertised as having a 10-day battery life and has a 1.64-inch Color AMOLED touchscreen. The Huawei Watch Fit has several sensors, including an accelerometer, a gyroscope, capacitive sensor, and an optical heart rate sensor. At the end of the day, this means that the watch continuously measures your heart rate, steps, sleep stages, and stress levels. Finally, it can also measure your oxygen saturation or SpO2 levels. Enough on the background, let's get to the sleep test. For the sleep comparison, I wore the Watch Fit to bed for 8 nights. At the same time, I also wore this portable scientific EEG device and I recorded myself using an infrared camera. The EEG device measures brain waves and muscle movements. It's called the Hypnodyne Z-Max and is being used by several of my colleagues in scientific studies. If you're interested in this device for scientific studies, I will link it below. I manually went through the recording of the EEG and scored each part of the night for the different sleep stages. I also exported my data from the Huawei servers and wrote some code to extract the data in a usable format. Now the data format they use is kind of weird, so I had to manually annotate 3 out of 8 nights to get the results to match perfectly with the data in the app. With the infrared recording, I can actually check what my movements were like and see if the Watch Fit correctly predicts when I'm awake. A quick but potentially important side note before I show you the results, and I also mentioned this in my video last week. The Watch Fit uses the Huawei True Sleep 2.0 technology. Huawei says it conducted a joint study with the Center for Dynamical Biomarkers at Harvard Medical School to validate their sleep tracking algorithm. I found an abstract from a conference that describes this study, which I will link below, but this provides very little details. Also, it seems they did not compare the sleep tracking of the Huawei algorithm to scientific EEG measurements, but instead to measurements based on heart rate and breathing rate. So I'm unsure how much trust to put in that study. Now, let's get to the results I obtained. Let's first have a look at the accuracy over the 8 individual nights, after which I will do a statistical overview analysis. Here we see the first night I recorded. On top, you see the sleep stages as they were recorded using the EEG device. On the horizontal axis, we have the time of night. And as you can see, I went to bed quite late, a little bit after 1 p.m. On the vertical axis, you have the different sleep stages, that being deep sleep, light sleep, REM sleep, and awake. Now the sleep stages are plotted in the order that are also usually displayed in research. On the bottom, you can see a similar plot, but now for the sleep stages as they were recorded using the Huawei Watch Fit. If we first look at deep sleep according to the EEG device, which are marked here in purple, we see only a partial overlap between the Watch Fit and the EEG device. In the beginning of the night we see a bit of a match, but later the Watch Fit detects a lot of deep sleep that was not really there, as you can see right here. Next, let's look at REM sleep, which are marked here in red. Here we see again a partial overlap, though the match appears to be better in the second half of the night, as you can see right here. The first half of the night does not show a great overlap. To see the sleep cycles, I added non-REM sleep in blue and again marked REM sleep in red. Each sleep cycle starts with a combination of deep sleep and light sleep, together called non-REM, and always end in REM. Looking at this night of data, I would say I would be able to pick up on the sleep cycles at the end of the night, but not at the beginning. So the second half of the night actually holds some promise, but I would need to look at more nights to make my final verdict. Next, looking at the times I was awake, marked here in green, the watch fit actually performed okay. It picked up on the longer awakening, but not the shorter one. The short awakening was actually detected as REM sleep by the watch fit. When it comes to sleep start and sleep end, marked here in yellow-brown, we see that the watch fit performs very well. It was very accurate at detecting sleep onset and the moment I woke up. Now, let's take a look at the second night of data, which I displayed here. Looking again at deep sleep first, marked here in purple, we see a similar situation to before. There's a partial match, but the watch fit predicts too much deep sleep during the other parts of the night. Also for REM sleep, we again see there's a pretty poor match at the beginning of the night, and one could argue that the second half of the night is better, though I'm not that sure. This also means that it's pretty difficult to pick up on the sleep cycles if we were just to look at the data from the watch fit. Looking at awake detection, again this is quite good. It picked up on most awakenings and just missed one. Additionally, it picked up on one extra awakening. Like before, it was pretty accurate at detecting when I fell asleep and when I woke up. As you will see also for the other nights, the watch fit is quite good at detecting the moment I fall asleep and when I awoke. There was a single exception though. And that is in this next night here. Looking at this night, we can clearly see that the watch had a delay in detecting sleep start. Detecting deep sleep seems to be a bit better for this night though, as you can see right here. Finally, REM sleep detection was quite bad for this night. As you can see, more than half of my night appears to be predicted as REM sleep by the watch fit. Comparing it to the EEG device on top, we can see that this did not match reality. Also, awake detection was quite bad for this night and the watch did not detect any of my awakenings. Now for the next 5 nights, I will just show the highlights to be sure that the patterns we observed are true for all of those nights as well. For this night here, again we see great sleep start and sleep end detection. The watch fit is also able to pick up on the longer awakening and actually predicts 2 extra shorter ones. REM sleep detection again is mediocre at best, but to me this often seems worse than that. Quite often what actually was REM sleep was detected as light sleep by the watch fit. This also means that the sleep cycles are difficult to detect based on just the data from the watch fit. For the next night, we actually see that the watch fit detected all awakenings and even 3 extra ones. However, as we can see for this next night here, most of the time it actually detects the right amount of awakenings or even misses a few shorter ones. The deep sleep detection was quite okay at the beginning of the night again, but it predicted a lot of extra deep sleep at the end of the night. For this second to last night, we see that the watch fit was very unstable at detecting the different sleep stages. They're all over the place, often shifting every few minutes from one stage to the next. Finally, for the last night, we see a similar pattern to before. Decent deep sleep detection at the beginning of the night, but a lot of extra deep sleep towards the end. And like before, the longer awakenings are generally detected, but not the shorter ones. Based on these results, I would draw the conclusion that the Huawei watch fit is really good at detecting when you fall asleep at night and when you wake up in the morning. Additionally, it detects awakenings during the night quite well, though it misses some of the shorter ones. Detecting deep sleep appears to be better at the beginning of my night compared to the end of the night, with way too much deep sleep detecting at the end of my nights. However, to get an even more objective view of the results, let's calculate some statistics regarding the consistency between the Huawei watch fit and the EEG device. First, let's look at the total percentage of each sleep stage the EEG device on the left and the watch fit on the right predicted. Overall, these percentages are a bit off. We see that the watch fit predicts too much deep sleep, which is consistent with what we saw in the individual nights. It also predicts too much REM sleep. To compensate, it predicts about 15% less light sleep than it should have. The total percentage of awake time, on the other hand, is quite accurate. More important even than these total percentages is checking if the watch fit predicts the correct sleep stages at the right time. And that's what I've displayed here. On top, we have the sleep stages according to the EEG device, and on the left, the sleep stages according to the watch fit. Now, each column here sums to 100%, meaning that we can see what percentage of each of the actual sleep stages was recorded as each sleep stage by the watch fit. If we first look at deep sleep, we see that about 50% of what was actually deep sleep was also predicted as deep sleep. Most of the rest of it was predicted as light sleep and a bit as REM sleep, but basically none of it was predicted as awake, which is good. If we look at light sleep on the other hand, we see that almost half of what was actually light sleep was correctly predicted as light sleep, whereas the rest was about evenly distributed between deep sleep and REM sleep. Next, only about a third of what was actually REM sleep was also predicted as REM sleep. Most REM sleep was actually tracked as light sleep by the watch fit, though only very little was confused with deep sleep. Finally, most awake time was indeed correctly detected as awake time. About 2/3 was correct, though a significant portion of it was actually detected as REM sleep. Overall, by adding this new information to the individual night sleep analysis we looked at before, my conclusions basically stay the same. The watch fit is really good at detecting when you fall asleep at night and when you wake up in the morning, and it detects the clear awakenings during the night quite well. It also detects a significant amount of the deep sleep correctly. However, it predicts way too much deep sleep, especially towards the end of the night. Overall, the tracking of the individual sleep stages throughout the night is not that great. Looking at these conclusions, they match in large strokes with what we saw last week for the Huawei Watch GT2 Pro. To put these results into perspective, let's compare the results from the watch fit to those of the GT2 Pro. Here you can see one night where I wore both the GT2 Pro, which you can see here on the bottom, and the watch fit, which is displayed here on top. Looking at the first half of the night, the results for both of these Huawei watches are pretty consistent. For the second half of the night, results deviate slightly more, but still there do not appear to be huge differences. And overall, this can be said for most nights, of which this plot is one example. The general patterns match well between the watch fit and the GT2 Pro, and for this final night I want to show you, this is also generally true, though it might deviate a bit more than the others. Now, to put the results in the context of other wearables, let's also include the results from the Fitbit Inspire 2, which I wore some of the same nights. 2 weeks ago, I showed you that this Fitbit device had pretty great sleep tracking accuracy. This is actually true for all Fitbit devices I've tested so far, like the Fitbit Charge 4 and the Fitbit Sense. Let's take a look. The top plot here displays the sleep stages as they were tracked by the scientific EEG device. The second plot are the sleep stages according to the Huawei Watch Fit, followed by the results according to the GT2 Pro and the Fitbit Inspire 2. Looking first at deep sleep, we can see that out of all three smartwatches, the Fitbit Inspire 2 shows by far the best match with the scientific EEG device on top. It doesn't have this problem of predicting way too much deep sleep at the end of the night. Next, looking at REM sleep and the sleep cycles, these are also much better for the Inspire 2, as you can see clearly in this plot. I will briefly show you 2 more nights, like this night right here, where again we have the same devices in the same order. Overall, the conclusions are the same as for the first night I just showed you. And we can say the same for the final night right here. If you wish, feel free to pause the video and compare the graphs in more detail. Finally, let's have a look at that in statistical terms and compare these 3 trackers side by side. Here we have the confusion matrices, similar to the one I showed you before, but now for all 3 trackers. On the left we have the one for the watch fit, in the middle for the GT2 Pro, and on the right the Fitbit Sense. If we first compare the watch fit with the GT2 Pro, we see similar patterns overall, though the watch fit might have had slightly better deep sleep detection and slightly worse light sleep detection. However, for the GT2 Pro, this was just a preliminary analysis, so this might be slightly different if I had more nights of data. What is most striking is the comparison with the Fitbit Inspire 2 on the right. This is by far the best prediction accuracy out of all 3 watches. Overall, when it comes to sleep tracking, the Huawei Watch Fit performed very well at detecting the moment I fell asleep and the moment I woke up, and it was also reasonably good at detecting awakenings. Compared to the Huawei Watch GT2 Pro, it appears to be slightly better at detecting deep sleep, though the differences aren't huge, and the results for the GT2 Pro are still preliminary. In general, detecting the specific sleep stages throughout the night was not one of the strengths of the Huawei Watch Fit. If you're interested in tracking your sleep stages using a wrist-worn wearable, I would recommend a Fitbit product, like the Fitbit Charge 4, Fitbit Sense, or the Fitbit Inspire 2 I looked at 2 weeks ago. As I tested in a previous video, when it comes to heart rate measurements, I was quite pleasantly surprised with the quality of the watch fit. So this is actually one of the strengths of the device. Would I recommend buying the Huawei Watch Fit? Well, yes and no. It really depends on what you're looking for. If you want a cheap smartwatch with good heart rate tracking, you want to know accurately how much time you spend in bed and your focus is not on the sleep stages, then yes, go for it. However, if you're mostly interested in the exact sleep stage tracking, then I would recommend a Fitbit product instead, like the Fitbit Charge 4. Also, if you're more interested in something that has a round watch face, the Huawei Watch GT2 Pro from last week or the cheaper GT2 and GT2e might be good options. If you want more frequent updates about the different devices I'm testing, there are links to my weekly newsletter and Instagram account in the description below. Finally, I should mention some of the limitations of the data that I showed here. First of all, I just tested the Huawei Watch Fit on me and it will be interesting to see how it performs on others. Also, to do a full sleep comparison, it would be good to test the Watch Fit against a full scientific polysomnography setup. I'm actually building my own polysomnography device using OpenBCI components as we speak, and the first components have already been assembled. This way I will not have to rely on sleep labs for my testing, which is especially difficult in these times of Corona. In my videos I do scientific tests on different devices like the Oura Ring, the Fitbit and the Scanwatch, and in the end I hope to use tracking to improve my life. So if you like that subject and like this video, consider subscribing to my channel and also consider giving it a thumbs up because it makes it easier for other people to find my videos. Thank you so much for watching and see you in the next video.